Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Unrequited Love by E.L. Roux. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. I pulled down hard on the smooth, dark wooden handle before me. Steam and the rich scent of brewing coffee hit me in the face seconds later, briefly obscuring the long line of waiting customers, particularly my ex standing on the other side of the counter. Nathan frowned. A lock of his short golden brown hair slipped from behind his ear, and he tucked it away before bracing his hands on the brushed metal countertop. His body was a rigid line of irritation. He sighed. I wasn't expecting to see you here, Jordan. Confused, I glanced around the magic-infused coffee shop I owned, the top off, and noted the smattering of small mahogany tables with iron-backed seats and two sets of brightly colored or oversized cushioned chairs by the bay windows, all of which were filled with customers. The view was normal for a Friday, a day I normally worked. I turned my attention back to Nathan's hazel eyes and carefully chosen gray business casual outfit. What are you talking about? He leaned against my counter, his well-dressed human body one I knew intimately. His expression held enough fake concern for me that I wanted to punch it right off his face, but I held back. I didn't want to scare off my customers. Nathan tugged at his ear, a nervous habit of his, and glanced over at the occupied chair by the window. We used to date. I clenched my teeth, unable to believe I wasted over a year of my life on this man who simplified our 3-year relationship to merely dating. We were engaged. He swung his arm out, almost hitting my silver-haired pixie friend and business partner Perry as she returned from dropping off a charmed drink for one of our customers. But Perry's dark gray glare didn't faze him, as he was likely used to it by now. He cleared his throat. You need to stop stalking me and Tiffany. You're always following us, showing up where we are. He uneasily tugged at his collar. We see you all the time. I laughed. I couldn't help it. You come to my coffee shop every day. Of course you see me everywhere, I sputtered back. Nathan glared as he crossed his arms. You were at the grocery store last week and the mall before then. I shook my head in disbelief, unable to believe that I used to love this man. What do you expect me to do? Go to the next town over to do my shopping for your convenience? He nodded and gestured to the front of my business where the light streamed in from the bay windows, and a beautiful woman occupied a lounge chair biting at the tips of her purple nails. I tuned Nathan out as the bell over the door rang, spying Kane, one of my surlier horned customers, entering the shop. I straightened to all of my 5'10" height and tried to end the conversation before Kane got close enough to cause a scene like he always did when Nathan bothered me. Taking a deep breath, I said, if you're tired of seeing me, I suggest you stop coming to my coffee shop and move out of the county I live in. Now, back to my original question. I picked up a warm metal carafe. What type of cream did you want in your Americano? He hunched his shoulders and requested skim before sulking away. Grumbling next to me, Perry finished making Kane's usual, a full milk latte, and slammed the cup on the counter. The heightened tingle of her magic brushed against my senses. She waited until Nathan sat down beside his new fiancé, a gorgeous purple-haired nymph, and was out of earshot before muttering, why do they continue to come here? It's not like there aren't other coffee shops. Humorlessly, I grabbed a paper cup and marked the drink type for the next order. We're still the closest one to their work. I set the cup down beside the gorgeous copper-accented espresso machine and took a customer's payment with a shrug. My guess is they can't make time for the shop 2.5 blocks away. Can't or won't, Perry snarked before greeting the next customer. I didn't know what I'd done to deserve seeing my ex and Tiffany at the top off every day, but I was sure it had something to do with Tiffany herself. Any drastic change to their surroundings and Nymph's instability issues would cause massive social problems for the neighborhood. Her purple hair flashed, drawing my attention to her as she leaned forward and settled her hand on Nathan's thigh. The ache in my heart spread as Nathan closed the distance between them and kissed. It wasn't that I wanted him anymore. The fact that he'd moved on had determined that for me, but that I missed the closeness, the feeling of being with someone who appreciated me, or at least I thought he had right up until the moment we broke up. Perry nudged me with her hip. I keep waiting for you to be a typical velour and lay into him. I frowned, not happy with my best friend wanting me to go medieval on my ex. Not you two. I get enough of that from Kane. Turning away from the embracing couple, I still didn't understand why Nathan continued to think it was okay for them to come here. As a human, he wasn't bound to people or places like nymphs were, and Tiffany would follow him anywhere now that she had tied herself to Nathan's energy. Knowing him, he probably thought it didn't bother me at all that they were here constantly and without rancor. But that might be my fault. I was the one who broke up with him after reiterating several times that there were no hard feelings between us. Our relationship had been plucked from my hands all because I'd made our Valentine's Day specialty drink for Tiffany 6 months ago. One boosted with a charm that enabled the drinker a clarity of the heart without manipulating their emotions. It was meant to provide a small bump of extra feeling on that magical day of love to heighten the experience of being with your partner. I didn't know she was going to give it to Nathan, and I'm still not quite sure why she did, but I have my suspicions. They'd been spending a lot of time together at work on a project proposal and texted each other frequently after hours. Nathan had a lot of friends, but he seemed to be more focused on her than the others. The sad thing was I liked her. When she ordered the drink, I thought it was for her significant other or something she wanted to enjoy for herself. I chuckled as I shifted to making drinks instead of taking orders. How naive I'd been. Perhaps the gods enjoyed my suffering, as Kane joked on more than one occasion when he hassled me during my downtime. That terrible day, Perry's quiet laughter had died abruptly as Tiffany approached Nathan's table with the cup and placed it in front of him. I winced with sympathy for the letdown I knew Tiffany was about to receive. I trusted in my fiancé's reaction and my belief that our love was enough of a buffer to soothe my initial gut reaction of fear. It wasn't like the drink had any power to sway anyone's emotions. It would merely bring his love for me to the forefront of his mind for a few moments before returning to where he normally kept thoughts of me throughout the day. I watched as Nathan lifted the cup, his warm hazel gaze locked on mine, probably thinking I'd made the drink for him, and Tiffany had just dropped it off. Smiling, he took a sip, and pain knifed through me. I knew the truth even as he turned from me and laughed so brightly at Tiffany. He didn't love me anymore, not if he focused on her. Perry had gasped, and the cup she held slipped from her fingers. As it shattered, the cup's hot liquid splattered my bare ankles. She clutched my arm hard enough to leave marks. It stung, but the pain was nothing compared to the agony ripping through my chest. Pressing my palm against my sternum, I rubbed at the biting ache that had settled deep. Nathan wasn't mine, not if he was in love with Tiffany, the attractive nymph who'd done nothing more than simply be herself. I didn't want to ask myself why Tiffany thought that the drink was something Nathan needed, but if the nymph thought he'd needed the clarity then, it saved me more heartache later, or at least that's what I tried to convince myself as my love life slipped through my fingers. Kane had arrived a few moments later, catching sight of the pair who were now embracing. His forced green eyes had frosted over as he glanced at me. Awkward. I glared at him, more than ready to take my anger out on the closest victim. My hand clenched on the empty metal pitcher at my side, ready to throw it at his face. My life had disintegrated to dust around me, and all he had to say was, "Awkward?" He stepped back. My intentions likely broadcasted through my expression because he quickly hustled away. Perry's grip settled gently on my forearm. "Jordan, honey, I'm so sorry." Hands shaking, I placed the pitcher on the counter and fled to the back room to escape the still embracing couple. The reaction was not one either Perry or Kane had expected. Volar emotions ran high and could at times be out of control, especially in situations like this. I'd expected that my mood swings would mellow the closer Nathan and I had gotten, but they had And they had to some degree, but after witnessing that soul-destroying moment, I'd swung straight down and hadn't really been able to emotionally pick myself up again. Volers normally paired with a mate by the time they came into their powers, the emotional connection creating a stability our powers blossomed under. At the illustrious age of 26, I'd become the oddball of the group, already peaking in my charm ability 4 years before. However, since the breakup, my abilities swung all over the place without warning. Now that I was alone, my normal cacophony of emotions tended to settle on depressed, no matter what I did to sway them toward contentment. Perry cleared the grounds of the last drink from the machine as Kane came to the counter to pick up his latte with a shot of charisma. And if anyone needed that extra dose of charm, it was Kane. Roughly half a head taller than my 5'10" frame, his dirty blonde mussed hair indicated he'd rolled out of bed and headed straight here. He'd probably failed to eat, too, which meant he'd soon be growling at anyone who came close, scaring away my customers. Snagging his drink, he headed toward his usual spot, a table far in the back. His mismatched horns glinted in the hanging lights where they emerged from his temples and curled behind his ears. His full-length left horn ended behind his jaw, while the other ended in a broken, jagged line that stopped 2 inches above his right ear. The surfaces were carved with the Wiccan lines of his trade and glowed occasionally within dimmer lighting. I started on the next drink and kept an eye on Kane as he scanned the crowd. I knew who he was going to find and that he'd give me crap about it. He'd been on my ass for the last 6 months to tell Nathan and Tiffany to take their business elsewhere. As expected, his stormy gaze landed on my ex and his fiancé, partially hidden behind a blossoming tree. I tensed, almost scalding my hand with the steamer wand as I waited for Kane's response. Instead of the usual frustrating smirk that made me wish I'd added some sleeping draught to his brew, he arched a brow in my direction as he calmly took a sip of his latte. I added a dash of positive energy to finish the order and called out the customer's name as I glared into Kane's green eyes. He flashed me a smile that set my nerves on edge. The next time he ordered, I'd add a bit of romantic incentive to his cup and see how much he'd enjoy getting his heart broken. Maybe then he wouldn't be so cavalier about my emotions. But then shame flooded me, leaving a sour taste in my mouth. I didn't open the business to manipulate emotions. That was a vow I'd taken and stuck to as soon as I started casting charms. Bad things happened to those who tampered with others' feelings without permission. Often, the charm turned against the caster, and the results were never good. Besides, who was I to say that Kane's next relationship wouldn't be his last? His maternal line would eat it up. It was what those of the Pan clan did upon catching any whiff of a bond. They locked on and held on to their potential partner tight, although I couldn't remember the last time he dated anyone. I passed the boosted mocha off to the human woman who needed a small pick-me-up for her 9 o'clock meeting and caught Nathan and Tiffany sharing another kiss. They really make a beautiful couple. My emotions swung wide as pain coiled in my chest, bringing tears to my eyes. Honestly, I felt like I was always going to be alone. I rubbed at the hollow ache, missing my grandfather like never before. He'd been wonderful to live with growing up, but a difficult man to get to know. He'd been dealt too many losses in life with the death of his wife before I was born and then my parents when I was 7. He'd refused to let me dwell on their deaths and always said life was never fair. To expect otherwise was to invite hatred into your soul. Every time I looked in the mirror, I caught a glimpse of him with his dark blue eyes staring back at me. He always said I'd taken after the caster side of the family with my dark black hair and pointed ears. I'd finally embraced the freckles scattered across my cheeks and nose as they were exactly the same as the ones that had ridden my human father's face. My grandpa would have gotten a kick out of my current situation, just like Kane, seeing it as more of a learning opportunity rather than the disillusionment of love I saw it as. Kane's horns caught in a flash of light as he tilted his head back to take the last sip of his drink, and I frowned, unsure why I was so bothered by him today. I wiped up a small spill on the drink pickup platform and scanned the room. Seeing that the influx of new customers had slowed, I tossed the coffee-stained towel onto the counter, cleared the grounds from the machine, and headed to the back of the shop. "I'm going to take 5, I called, catching the nod from Perry as I worked my way through our maze of densely packed tables. As I pushed the heavy metal door open at the end of the hall, Clear blue sky and a crisp breeze ruffled the short hair around my ears. The cool wind proved a pleasant break from the heat and steam behind the counter. I leaned against the rough bricks lining the wide alley behind the top off, the space wide enough to comfortably fit the semi-truck deliveries for the clothing store at the back of the alley, which meant I got to enjoy the bright sun warming my skin in silence. Moments later, the door swung open and a pair of horns belonging to a man with way too much stubbornness entered the alley. I sighed, miffed that my solitude had been broken. "What do you want, Kane?" He propped his lean body next to mine, one knee cocked with his foot resting on the wall. Crossing his arms, his shoulder grazed mine as he stared straight ahead. "You sure you don't want to tell him to fuck off?" I laughed. I couldn't help it. That had to be one of the more eloquent requests I'd received from him, and I'd heard a lot. I cut my humor short when he tensed, knowing he was truly upset by the fact that Nathan and Tiffany continued to visit. With a sigh, I said simply, "No." Looking him over, I noticed, not for the first time, that he was a damn fine man. He had rugged good looks that could land him a solid modeling career. The raw sexuality of the Pan clan would ooze off the ads if he ever decided to put the work into it, but he preferred his coven life and the solitude it brought. He scratched at his left horn and glowered. "Fine." I bit back a smile, shaking my head. "I'm surprised your wonderful attitude hasn't landed you a more permanent partner," I teased. "Perhaps I haven't found the right one yet." He turned to face me, reaching out to brush a stray lock of hair from my forehead. I fought the instinctive urge to move away from the touch, any touch, and realized there hadn't been much to fight in the first place. His hand fell back to his side. "Are you still upset that your Valentine's drink manipulated Nathan's feelings?" Anger coursed through me in an instant, souring my stomach. The telltale tingle of my magic reached my fingertips. "You, of all people, should know that unlike some Volar, my potions only boost energy or expose the inner truth, never change a person's emotions. If that were the case," I said through clenched teeth, "I would have gotten rid of your bad attitude a long time ago." Kane shrugged, a smile tilting his lips. "You'd miss it." Grumbling, I crossed my arms. "Probably." I chuckled at my own brashness, something I had a hard time controlling when Kane was around, and sighed, knowing I'd never try to change who he was, even if he caused my moods to fluctuate more than I wanted. "Is your coven attending the art walk tonight, or are you going stag?" I snorted, laughing at my own joke. "Very funny." He fondled the broken tip of his horn, a grin playing at the corner of his lips. "I'll likely come alone, as most will be attending my cousin's wedding." I turned to face him better. "Why aren't you going?" Kane shrugged, glancing over my shoulder before meeting my gaze. "I couldn't find a date." I knew a lie when I heard one. Even if he was desperate, which I heavily doubted, he could have taken one of his sisters who would drop everything for him. Or even a friend. I pointed toward the end of the alley. "I want the truth, or you can leave." Straightening, Kane frowned, growling a deep rumble in his chest. "Fine." His jaw clenched, a muscle ticking at his temple. A car horn blared in the distance, breaking the tense silence. "He's marrying my ex-fiancé." Everything clicked as I stared at Kane, who up until now hadn't taken his eyes off me. The hollow ache in my chest warmed at our shared hell. "Ah." His lips kicked up at the corners. "Yeah," he said as he pushed away from the wall. "You can see then why I wouldn't want to attend." And why he continued to hassle me in helping Nathan and Tiffany move on. I understood that driving desire to fight off loneliness. I'd been struggling to fill the void within myself ever since my grandpa passed away. For a time, I'd let Nathan in, but that had backfired royally, leaving me in an even deeper well of emotional pain than before. One I feared would forever be empty. "I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of your break alone," Kane drawled as he headed toward the back entrance of the top-off. "And I'll see you tonight when you get to meet my maternal monarchs." I sputtered in disbelief. "What did I do to deserve that?" He gave me a mock bow from where he held the door open, the noise from the shop drifting out. "Don't worry, they're not too bad." Eyes bright, he looked me over. "They promise not to terrorize you too much." The door closed behind him, startling a bird near the bright yellow feeder I'd hung to liven up the alleyway. I plucked at my black coffee-smeared apron, mentally sifting through my checklist for tonight and adding a few items the Pan clan would enjoy. I frowned at the sparrow that tossed a few seeds to the ground. What the hell is Kane up to? Heading back inside, the horned Pan was nowhere to be seen. I took over the register for Perry and rang up the next customer as I pushed the problem of tonight to the back of my mind. An hour later, Perry cornered me as I wiped down the tables, her silver hair a halo around her head. Her dark gray eyes met mine with utter seriousness. You've been distracted ever since you came back from break. Do we need to ban Kane from the shop? What? The damp cloth plopped onto the table. No, nothing like that. Crossed my arms and leaned my hip against the edge of the surface. We're to be overrun by Kane's family tonight, and I've been trying to think of how we can adjust our appetizer menu to cater to their sensitive palates. Perry raised an eyebrow. If by sensitive you mean paleo, you're going to have fun balancing all the different groups of people and their diets, especially since my mother is coming. We're already expecting pixie, pan, elves, nymphs, dwarves, and trolls, along with humans and the occasional other being. Should we cancel food altogether? I wiped my hands on my apron with a frown. It's getting way more complex than I'd hoped. Perry sighed. Let me ask my mom who she uses for her shows. That was why I left Perry. She always had answers to our business problems. Hopefully they'll be available on such short notice and within our price range. Your mom doesn't throw cheap parties. I flashed her a knowing look. As one of the prestigious fashion designers in the nation, Perry's mother, Pondre, used her full pixie potential of creating chaos within the industry, along with her innate skills to craft outfits couples had gone to court for, fighting over who owned the clothing they purchased from her shops when separating. Perry took a step back, her gaze skimming down my body. I knew that look. We were close enough in height that she was probably thinking about loaning me an outfit to impress her mom. Not that I hadn't already met her before in dirty work clothes, but our physical shapes were completely different. I had narrow shoulders and hips, while she definitely had an hourglass figure. Never mind that the pixie's color palette was cooler than mine, her skin more olive gray compared to my warm brown. She tapped a painted fingernail against her lips and thought, I might have something for you to wear. I loved all of Perry's clothes. She was always fashionably dressed outside of work, regardless of the situation. If I could afford it, I'd ask her to help me fill out my wardrobe. That didn't mean I'd sit back and let her complain about my outfit. Voller had been known to go to war for less, even if Perry did make a valid point. I tugged my apron to the side. Why can't I wear this? She frowned at my blue jeans and earth-toned shirt peeking out from behind a dirty black apron. Because the whole reason we agreed to do this art walk was to drum up more customers. I shrugged. We'll be making drinks, which means my outfit will be hidden behind a clean apron anyway. Having local artists showcase their work at the top-off provided exposure and a chance to help improve inter-community relations. It was something Perry and I had worked on setting up for the last couple of months and hoped to repeat in the future. If the success of the event hinges on my outfit, then fine. You can pick out my clothes for tonight. Perry rubbed her hands together. The gleam of excitement in her silver gaze sent panic through me.